I said, what, when we first started the call, I don't know how it came up, but I said, I have a house guest, and that house guest is for 2 weeks. We're in week 1 of week 2. And she's a 14-year-old from New Jersey that just graduated the 8th grade. This will be entering high school. And this is her 3rd summer that she's come from New Jersey to stay with her aunt here in California. So she really looks forward to this every year. And we have a great relationship. But as I said, she's an exceptionally intuitive 14-year-old. Like she really gets the big pictures. And so I enjoy our time together as well. But I also am learning a lot. I think we learn a lot from each other, but you learn a lot from a 14-year-old because you can't assume that what you're saying, the words you're using, she has the definition of. So, you know, what's the beauty of technology, because she always has her phone with her, of course, she's 14 years old, right? If I start a conversation and I use a word, the first thing I'll stop and I'll look at her, and she, even though she's shaking her head, I said, do you know what that means? And then she'll smile and say, no. I said, okay, that's fine. Google it. And so I think she's Googled just in one conversation six times, right? So I said, there's your keyword, screenshot that. You're going to use that in life. Trust me. And so the conversation goes from there, but it gives me a chance to do the Google search that she reads back to me, but it gives me a chance to update the definition of that word and the meaning of that word, how it's being used today, not just the dictionary, my version of it. Most of the time I'm very, very closer than I expected, but sometimes we both learn together what the definition of that word means. So yeah, I'll continue on, but I think it has become kind of a mentoring relationship.
Yeah, I can't tie that into the subconscious thing. So I'm going to just start talking about the subconscious and I'll cut that part off. It's an interesting discussion to have, but I can't tie it into the subconscious and I don't want to force it. So
yeah, but that is one of the words that I use for her. I was explaining to her during one of these conversations is of how the mind works, right? I said, understand how the mind works. And actually, let me start off by saying, I said, you know, Arlene, find your superpower, because we all have our superpower. I think you're going to do some big things in the world. I really think you can. The challenge is the world trying to change you or beat that out of you or not allow you to be yourself. And that's just part of being a kid. That's part of being 14-year-old. You're going to make some bad decisions and so on. But if you can hang on to that superpower and do the superpower of seeing the big picture and being able to own that, you can do some great things in the world. My concern is, will the world beat it out of her, right? By conforming. And I think that often happens as you go through high school and then on through life, right?
Yeah, well, you gotta, one of the things that you could bless her with is the idea that she could then germinate on, that don't ever do something or not do something because somebody said you should or shouldn't do it. Okay. That's only a tiny bit of the information that you need to make that decision. They might be right, but they might not be right.
That's right.
And they're equally as probable, right? So you take that into the world when you bump up against stuff that you intuitively think is the right thing for you to do, but it's scary. Normally that means you should do it, you know?
Yeah.
And the thing that really impresses me about this thought process, Jim, and it is related to the subconscious, because that's what drives 95% of our behavior, is how powerful it is in someone like you or me, who's conscious of this kind of thing, who's aware, who's self-aware of the power of wisdom, that you can change this girl's life. Most likely.
I really appreciate you saying that, because I think after saying that, I realized the same. Not everybody is aware of this. And, we've talked a lot about our system and so on, and I'll let you elaborate on how we broke it down in these 5 areas. But, in the center, it always comes back to self, right? Self-awareness, self-alignment. So I added a new one. It's called self-concept. And our self-concept is what we think of ourselves. And, yeah. And then there also our self. So now we'll get into the word she Googled. I'll read my version of it, full disclosure on my reading abilities at times. We'll see how it goes today. But this is what, because there's 2 terms for it. So I said, Google subconscious. Turns out that subconscious is also used as AKA unconscious. It's one of the same words. They get mixed up, but modern day it's one of the same thing. So you can, they're interchangeable, at least for modern day.
Well, then they have, and unconscious has more than one meaning, right? So unconscious could mean subconscious, or it could mean you just passed out, right?
Well, thank you for saying that. That is exactly it. But it turns out the mind has, different levels. So here's the, there's 3 levels actually. We'll get more into the technical term here, but it's a reservoir of feelings, thoughts, urges, and memories, often unacceptable or unpleasant, of pain, anxiety, or conflict. So that is the, let's just say, most modern term. So it's typically, it's an event, something that happened that was unpleasant, that creates pain, anxiety, or conflict. And we've talked about this before. I believe a lot of that happens in that age between 10 and 15, a lot. That's really your mind being programmed, and then right into your 20s, and then so on. That's
I think I've heard this. I'm not a doctor. You're not a doctor, I know, but I've heard that your foundational self is formed by the time you're 4 or 5 years old. But what you're talking about is then the influences of the external world.
Absolutely.
On your environment, your parents, what part of the country you're from, what country you're from, what culture did you grow up in, what religion are you following? There are all these things and people that are in front of you, and some of them bounce off you, and they leave a mark, but it's not a conscious mark. It's in your subconscious. How you think about money, how you think about men, how you think about women, how you think about young people, how you think about old people, religion, and the list is a mile long. But I think my favorite part, as I've become or attempted to become more self-aware my entire life, but certainly seems like it's accelerated as I've gotten to midlife, because maybe I just have more time. The kids aren't around anymore. I got more time on my hands to think about shit. I don't know why, but
I just to add to what you're saying, I realized the responsibility I have when I answer a question that she has, or when we're having a conversation, responsibility, right? Because I know it'll be an impression for the rest of her life. Just the fact that she flew, 5,000 miles or 3,000, whatever, New Jersey to California is, to spend her summer, it is shaping her lens for the rest of her life. And
I think we have to appreciate so much your sensitivity to that and your awareness of that. And I try and bring that awareness to every conversation I have with everybody, but particularly young people, because you made the point earlier off recording that you bring a different conversation to her. You bring different words, different phrases, because you're sensitive to the fact that she's a 14-year-old girl. And there's too many people that don't even think about that when they open their mouths. And I think we should all be aware of the impact that we can have with our words on people, not tiptoeing around stuff, not, worrying all the time about offending people. That's not what I'm talking about. Just like, am I talking to my 14-year-old niece, or am I talking to my 50-something wife, or am I talking to a teenage girl, that's from a broken family? You know, I mean, you just got to bring an awareness to the conversation. I don't think any of us do enough of that, but the subconscious stuff, and you and I have done a lot of work on this, some of it together and some of it individually. But I think that it's amazing to me. And I just read an article this morning as well that a prospect of mine pushed my way, because we're both interested in this topic, is that how much control we have over our own thoughts, and how little control we often exercise over our own thoughts.
Yeah.
Right. I think that's fascinating. And I think that I've also heard from some of my other work in this area, 95% of what we do and say is being driven by our subconscious. So we're not even aware that we're doing it or saying it.
Yeah.
95% of the time. It's like 5% of what we do, we're consciously deciding to do.
Yeah.
And it's the simplest example of the subconscious behavior that we don't think about is breathing. You know, that keeps us alive, and we don't even think about it, you know? So with this,
and the importance of how the oxygen to the brain affects the way the brain thinks. And if you're starving it from oxygen, it's not functioning. It doesn't have what it needs to function fully. So yeah, that's why I know you're into meditation and breathing, something I'm always trying to improve, but you bet it's related to that.
I have, and this spiritual operating system program that I'm in, I attribute to the fact I woke up this morning, dude, and I remembered my dream, at least in part. I don't often remember my dreams, and maybe I don't dream a lot. I don't know, but I usually have this, there's usually some sort of confrontation, and I'm either being chased by someone or about to be engaged in a fight with somebody.
That's your subconscious mind. That's exactly what I just said. That is a feeling, thought, or memory that's unpleasant, that creates pain or anxiety or conflict. It also, with this article, when I did this deep dive on the subconscious mind, it never stops. It goes 24/7, and even your dreams are directly related to your subconscious mind.
No question. And I think there's a lot of probably misinformation about dreams and a lot of interesting information about dreams. But to finish my train of thought, this morning I remembered the dream. It wasn't a negative dream. It was a positive dream. I was being presented with a very lucrative offer to take on a project and it was a very specific number, $252,000.
Yeah,
right.
That's cool. But that's manifesting maybe a thought.
It's got to do with the work I've been doing over the last couple months. I guarantee it, because some of this work involves visualizing who I want to be 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now. And I'm striving to improve in a number of areas of my life. I suppose we should always do that, but the subconscious mind is crazy powerful. But my favorite part about some of the discoveries I've made in midlife, you know, being that imperfect man that I am, is how much control we can have over our things like our happiness, our thoughts,
great stuff. This
our,
is exactly,
our mood.
But you have to reprogram your subconscious mind, and human beings are one of the few animals that can actually do this, right?
I think there's maybe we're
the only animal that can do this.
Yeah. Maybe we're in the minority of humans. Maybe most of us just kind of go through life never really thinking about this stuff and just kind of accepting our circumstances. I know midlife does this. We've talked about this before with guys in midlife. Your phrase is you either get bitter or you get better.
Yeah.
Another way of saying that is just to say, am I going to spend the rest of my life on a journey towards a better life? Or am I going to just accept my circumstances because I don't believe there's a whole lot I can do about that?
Yeah.
And I think there's a large percentage of the population that just accepts their circumstances. And it's really kind of sad. And I'm not, saying I'm anything special. I'm just saying I identified that as a choice, a fork in the road. And I didn't like bitter. Bitter didn't appeal to me. So I said, I'm not going to accept that.
Yeah.
I'm going to pursue better and try and figure out what that means. And then I discovered that what that means is you have to pursue better for the rest of your life. And hopefully you were pursuing better for most of your life up to that point. I believe I was, but not as consciously as I am now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's powerful stuff, man.
It is. And I think what I wanted to do is equip her with these tools that as she goes on into life, that she realizes, sometimes of course you have to buy in, you have to do your homework, you have to show up, and those are all basic, really fundamental things. But this is to your point. You can change that as you get older. You can shape that. You do have control of this. It is your responsibility. The ages between 14 and 15 and 16 is that you have to take responsibility for your actions, and the consequences. And now she's entering that age. And of course, she got a sunburn at the beach, because that's what you do when you're 14 and you forget to put suntan lotion on, right? We've all had that, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's
I was
the
talking
impressionable
to
years. Yeah.
I was talking to a really good friend of mine the other night. I haven't talked to him in too long. I feel like I've fallen out of touch with too many people.
Mhm.
And maybe it's just life shifting, people's responsibilities changing. Maybe it was some COVID, maybe. But he asked me how my kids were, and he knows them all. He knows Caroline very well, because she lived in Chicago for 3 years where he was. So it's cool to have a friend who's friends with your kid as well.
Of course. Yeah.
It's fun. And but when he asked me, how are your kids, I thought for a second, because my initial response was, they're great, they're doing good. I said, what I'm most proud of is I'm most proud of the fact that all three of them have accepted responsibility for their own happiness.
That's great. Yeah. What an important point you just made right there. If you could teach a 14-year-old one thing, you are responsible for your happiness, not somebody else. And I know at 14, can't have a card, they're going to take you to the amusement park. They're going to take you to all these different places and try to, create fun. But your happiness doesn't come from those events. It has to come from inside you and enjoying the moment. And
yeah, you got to get the inside work done, and then the outside stuff, whatever's supposed to come your way comes your way, whether it's money or success or fame or whatever. But you can't focus on the stuff. You got to focus on the inner work. And once you figure that out, man, particularly if you can figure that out at a young age, but if you for anybody that's listening, if you're like miserable or you're unhappy or you're not content with things, recognize that it might take a long time, and it might take a shift in some of your behaviors that might be uncomfortable, but it's right there, man. And all you got to do is start right now. Right now, just accept that as reality.
The one sucky thing about being 12, 13, 14 is they just take you just get in the car and they take you to all these places, right? You can't even say, they ask you, what do you want to do? And then they go do whatever they want to do. But they're just trying to take you what I call them fun factories, right? Well, let's do this. This will be fun. This will be fun. And you're going, okay, whatever. I guess I'm having fun. I don't know about you, but I never liked amusement parks and fun factories.
No, I loved
fabricated fun is the most uncomfortable experience I've ever had as a kid and an adult. Fabricated fun, right? Disneyland, those kind of amusement.
Well, you're as far away from Disneyland as I am from Disney World, or vice versa. I despise that. I despise that place before they went woke. Right.
I do too. And why is that? Why do you?
I don't like crowds, and I refuse to wait in line for anything.
Some people apparently love that because otherwise they wouldn't be there. It's also expensive.
Well, it's amazing that
and terrible food, the worst food you can put in your body. So it's quite a machine.
It's crazy, but that'll drive us on to another set of topics that we don't have time for. But I think that the point you're making is that these fabricated fun spots, what we did, and I really have to give my parents credit for this. We went camping, we went hiking, we went to the beach, we traveled to other states, we rode horses, right? We went fishing,
got connected to nature. Got to appreciate the creek, the rock, the stuff that doesn't cost any money, right?
And hey, Mark, by the way, there's a whole nother world out there, right? That you can spend your whole life and you're not going to see it all. I was
fortunate too. My parents had a lot of camping in there with some other things, so we got to experience. Well, we didn't have, we only went to Disneyland one time. There was 4 of us, and it wasn't in the budget. And
how lucky for you.
Yeah. In the end, it turned out to be fine.
But I think that, those kinds of the work that I'm doing now, and I'm sure you're the same because we talk frequently enough, is, what are those things that are in my subconscious, that I got from so-and-so or such and such at a certain age that are in my way, for lack of a better phrase. They're keeping me from being as successful as I want to be, or as kind as I want to be, or as grateful or helpful or wise, or, just pick a positive notion to get better at. And if I'm not where I think I can be, why is that? And it's always in the subconscious. It's always in the subconscious. So, and then once you start thinking about that, like that, and start saying, okay, I do have some impact on this, because Jim, it expands out into everything we do all day. I know that I'm familiar with that woman, Marissa Peer. She's a British woman, I believe.
Interesting. Yeah, that was a Google search. I never heard of her.
I think I was listening to one of her meditations or guided meditations at one point. So her partial quote here is, with your self-concept, your master program, this is why repeating positive affirmations are so effective. You can actually reprogram your own thought patterns by slipping in positive and success-oriented sound bites. The subconscious and unconscious mind are used interchangeably. And then this is Michael Craig Miller, who's an MD, in an article for Harvard Health. The term unconscious mind is most closely associated with Freud and psychoanalysis. For Freud, it was a key element of the theory he was developing to explain the causes of mental disorders and how to treat them. Put in the simplest terms, Freud theorized that hidden mental contents were making people ill. As he understood it, these mental contents had been repressed and made unconscious.
That
interesting.
Yeah, really interesting. So that was two. How many?
Yeah.
I sent you two texts.
That was hang on. That was the first one. I did not read the first one. Okay. Oh, I should have read them in a different. This is the beginning of Marissa Peer's. I should have read them in a different order.
That's right.
But we can string them together.
Okay.
The 3 levels of awareness.
Yeah, this is what the foundation of the conversation today is based on the human mind. And I thought this was helpful to understand that in this context.
Conscious mind, the definition, this contains all of the thoughts, memories, feelings, and wishes of which we are aware at any given moment. This is the aspect of our mental processing that we can think and talk about rationally. This also includes our memory, which is not always part of consciousness, but can be retrieved easily and brought into awareness. Then the second one she has here is preconscious. This consists of anything that could potentially be brought into the conscious mind. And then unconscious, in parentheses, or subconscious mind. This is a reservoir of feelings, thoughts, urges, and memories that are outside of our conscious awareness. Most of the contents of the unconscious are unacceptable or unpleasant, such as feelings of pain, anxiety, or conflict. So I read the first half second and the second half first, but
that's okay. But again, just tying it back to a 14-year-old about the responsibility, if she understands this early on, the power of that later on in life, right? So she's not finding herself in a place where she doesn't have control of her life. And then, so I want to share this with you. So, and I have quotes on my refrigerator and just different parts of the house, right? So, she'll ask me about them, or I'll read. We'll be having a conversation. I'll say, hey, let me share a quote with you. So this is funny. So she left today to go to Great America with her other aunt or something, and she left this on the kitchen table. Don't take criticism from people you would never go to for advice. Pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I've heard that before, but I think
that's a 14-year-old that left it. She wrote it.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That's so awesome. It goes to show you, she's already taking that in, right? Like,
well, I think we have a responsibility as adults to take care of these kids, whether they're our kids or not, by example, by mentorship, by modeling, by the words we use and the actions we display. But we also have that same responsibility for people of any age. And I don't think we collectively as humans do a good enough job of consciously being aware of that when we're in particular moments. And boy, what a wonderful thing to be able to be is aware when you're getting angry, or aware when you're getting scared or aware when you're getting anxious early on, and have tools that enable you to quell that,
Yes.
mitigate that, and perhaps even stop it in its tracks.
Mm-hmm.
They're all available to all of us, and they're all free.
Yeah.
You know, that's
Yeah.
nuts, man.
I hate to be pessimistic, but I have to say, a 14-year-old you can really impress upon. A 70-year-old, an 80-year-old, you're not changing the way they see the world. You may, for a brief second, modify their thinking, but they're going to default right back. So I don't want to be over pessimistic, but I have to say, I don't think we can spend too much of our valuable time and energy trying to change the mind that has been developed to believe a certain thing. And
yeah, no, I agree. I agree and disagree to some extent, but I think the majority of people, you're correct. But it made me immediately think about my father again. When I first started getting into this Wim Hof breathing, which really can get your subconscious mind in good shape. It's like going to the gym for your subconscious mind, is breathing stuff, because you're thinking the whole time, and you're thinking, you have choices about what you think. Anyway, I did it for, I think, about a month or two, and I really enjoyed it. And I was talking to my dad one day, this was a couple of years ago, and I told him about it. And he didn't tell me he was going to go do it, but I sent him the link. And it was like 3 hours later, he goes, I got to tell you, he called me back.
That's cool. Yeah, I think you mentioned that before, but I think it's so cool that he actually took action, and
he's still doing it at 94. He started doing it when he was 92. So it depends on the type of person. He's always been a lifelong learner, always. Yeah. And he's always been a good listener. He pays attention. Mm-hmm. So those are tools that will help with all of this work, right? You have to listen well, and you have to pay attention, right? But I think that you use the word control. Once you understand that you're in control of all of this, so many bad things go away. You stop blaming other things and other people. You stop feeling like the victim. You stop. There's so many good things
you stop
that
depending on somebody else for your happiness or fulfillment. It's natural to want that from other people, but you don't have to completely depend on that or be tethered to their actions for your happiness or fulfillment. And that's I think we all fall into that to some degree, but you could stop it and look at yourself, not be mad at them.
Yeah, you can. And I, and my older brother is famously in my world for saying, how do you feel about the opinions of other people? He's like, I don't give a fuck about what anybody else thinks about me. And I believe him, because I've spent so much time with him, and he can be a very pleasant, very generous guy, but he really is not. He doesn't walk around thinking, I hope I don't offend anybody, because that's the other side of the coin, right? Yeah. Self-awareness is great, but worrying about dancing on eggshells and being a victim and all that kind of stuff is a waste of time. Yeah. But I
want to share something before as we wrap up, because we're getting close on 30 minutes. But I think I mentioned to you, I started this Hayward High football alumni, close to 15 years ago. And you've heard me many times talk about, this was inspired by this book, and about, you want to change the world. You start with changing a young man. Right. And the young man, the book was inspired by this professional football coach. And anyway, the short version of it is he tells the story about how it was a warm-up practice, and one of the parents walked up and said, hey, what do you think of the team this year? And he goes, I'll tell you in 15, 20 years. So this is my 15, 20 years that are coming up of these kids. That my first year that I started doing this, he started mentoring and started really getting involved. And, fortunately, since then, we've built brand new facilities. We've built new locker rooms, but they've all come back to coach. And so last night, or today's Wednesday, so that was Monday night, I took the youth program, which is also an alumni guy. He's got about 165 kids, youth age. And then I took the high school program, which is and combined it to the same facility. So now we have both programs together. But it was really cool, because first I got to see a lot of these players that I see them regularly, but they're now the coaches, and they've played at the next level. So they play junior college or university football. So they're running a really, really solid program. This is their first year, head coach, assistant coach, so on. Nice. PE teacher, Both of them have their master's degree. That's the lower field, the main field, where the news field. But then the upper field is the youth program. And so you've got the 6-year-olds all the way to the 14-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this, my message has always been very simple, right? Be proud of who you are, be proud of where you're from. Anything is impossible in this country, but you have to work and you have to show up, and it's hard to show up. But I believe so strongly in the fundamentals you learn in sports early on. It's nothing to do with the game, but you learn how to compete, you learn how to buy in, you learn how to show up, and how the best thing you can do to help a young person is to give them those tools and do that by modeling what that looks like, and then be proud of who you are, right? That's your family, that's your heritage, whatever that is. And Hayward's very diverse. So we have, every flavor there is. And then, but also where you're from. So being part Hayward. So it was fun. I'm just sharing kind of the moment to see this all kind of come together. I'm the liaison. I kind of keep things going between the head coaches and the principal and all the different entities, not in an official role, but more as a mentoring role. And it's just, it's cool that I can walk in and out and just see it happening. And
yeah, I love hearing you talk about that work. And I got a little slice of that in my couple years back. I spent about 3 years going over to the Homeless Coalition downtown and on Saturday, and taking a group that could be 5 or 6 to maybe 15 kids that were homeless over to an adjacent field. And we played flag football for an hour. And then we ordered a bunch of pizzas and sat around, and they asked questions and I told stories, and it was all,
it affects them for the rest of their life. It really does affect the way that they view the world.
And during the game, you have all these opportunities to teach based on a behavior or a reaction or encouragement. That was really nice that you knocked him down, but then you reached out and just gave him a hand and picked him up, pat it, and rubbed the dirt off his back. Yeah. That's a really human thing to do. That's a really cool move. And you just kind of reinforce. It's such wonderful work. And I just think that
even everybody wearing the same uniform and lining up on the same line. And like I said, being part of something, being part of something bigger than yourself, and buying in enough that you can enjoy the rewards from that. It's such an important part of
well, you're now in that regard the external person and circumstance that will embed itself into their subconscious minds for the rest of their lives, and that's not unpleasant. That's going to be very handy. It's going to be very pleasant. But I think for our audience of middle-aged men or anybody, I really think as correct as you are, that we're not going to change the minds of 60, 70, and 80-year-old people as much as we're going to change the minds of younger people. I think that when you're at a juncture in your life in middle age where you're contemplating divorce, you're gaining weight, you've lost some money, someone died, someone got sick, these crossroads, when those are also the opportunities for you to decide, okay, I don't like the way this makes me feel. I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
And the doing something about it is starting to look into that subconscious mind and how it works and why you're reacting the way that you're reacting, because chances are you're not doing it on purpose. You're doing it subconsciously.
Good stuff, Mark. It reminds me of because they have, there must be 15 coaches out for the youth, and we've got another 10 or more coaches for the high school levels, all 3 levels. But one of the coaches came up and he's like, yeah, really enjoying this. And I said, well, I really appreciate you volunteering your time. And he goes, yeah, and he older guy, probably in the 60s or something. And no, middle-aged guy, I don't know about older guy, but he said, yeah, I was a coach in San Francisco for years. I love this. And so you're right. It's inviting them to be a part of something and letting them serve in their own way. He's a coach. I'm not a coach. I'm not a field coach. I just am not good at yelling at kids to jump up and down and do this and that. That's his thing. And he really enjoyed being knowing that he's contributing to that in his way. So I appreciate what you're saying. There's all ways you can contribute. Not everybody has to have the same skill sets, right? You need different skill sets, but his contribution in his life, of course, he doesn't have any kids in the program. He just wanted to volunteer his time
Yeah.
Because he knows the impact that it had on him. And then
Yeah.
everybody's got a story they can relate to. My story is clearly, had not been for high school football, particularly rugby, I don't believe, I know for certain I wouldn't be here right now. I'd be dead or in jail, like some of my cousins. And I've shared that story before. So,
yeah. No, Denzel Washington tells a story about growing up and where he grew up. I want to say it was Compton, but I don't know that to be true. It wasn't a pleasant area.
Mhm.
And how two of his friends, his best friends, spent their lives in jail, and that his dad came to him when he was like 7 and said, "No, you're not going that way. You're coming over here."
Mhm.
And it was just that simple. He said, "No," he saw that, and if it wasn't for him, criminals, there's no 7-year-olds in jail, right? But
Yeah.
that's when they get created.
Yeah.
It's just, and again, around all this, just an awareness for everybody that, you are in control, but you have to exercise that control, and you have to choose to be responsible for your own happiness and your own future.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad you mentioned about your father. No question. There's some great fathers that support, but it doesn't always have to be the father. It could be that secondary role model that often could be that coach. It could be that teacher, the neighbor, the uncle, somebody, but it has to be a man that they respect and value. And that's not discounting a woman's or a mother's responsibility, but this is also the importance of having both a father figure and a mother figure, or forget about the mother father, just figures that they can relate to at different stages in their life. It's really important.
if you get under the covers with almost any famous athlete, you're going to hear a story about somebody that changed their life.
Yeah.
And it would be a coach. It would have been a coach or a teacher or an uncle or some man in the community that was just a mentor, a priest, whatever. It's amazingly powerful. I'm really enjoying doing the spiritual work that I'm doing. And most of it is get inside your own head and change the narrative, and expect
coaching. But you could, like I said, you can be coached at any age, the importance of coaching.
Yeah. No, good stuff. I enjoyed this today, Jim. We'll catch up to you next week.
All right.
So
the imperfection is the perfection. What's the takeaway from today's call as far as imperfection?
Well, I think to me, it's
the imperfect the
context is that we're all imperfect.
Yeah.
All of us men, all of us people, and that's okay. But you can move the needle. You're never going to get to perfect. I don't even think you want to aspire to perfect. I think that's a waste of energy, but moving towards that and getting better at this and better at that and happier here and more joyful there and contributing more and helping more and just gaining wisdom that you can share. I think those are all, that's where the perfection is. And that starts with all of this imperfection, but we have control over moving that needle. We do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if I was to use the metaphor, there's a lot of construction going on at the school. So there's buildings that will turn up and there's all these construction sites. And I was saying it's a bit of a hassle, but it is a metaphor for construction, of being involved in the construction. Things have to look ugly for a while. They're a mess. And but when it all comes together, and that's what I like about this time of the year and how it leads into the football season, which comes in the fall, then everybody comes together, right? But you're out there making mistakes, you're learning. And then when the lights go on Friday night and everybody's dressed up and they're all lined up and they know what they're doing, nobody sees all this. This is hours or hundreds of hours to be prepared. So when everybody gets in the stands and lights go on, then the focus is on them and what they do. But it's a metaphor for life as well.
Yeah, it is. I think it's we don't get to see all those ugly hours all the time. And when they show you a video of a construction of a large structure of any kind, and they just stick a camera there and it's there for like 6 months and it just is constantly filming, and then they speed the whole thing up.
Yeah.
So you can see the construction, 6 months of construction in like 60 seconds or 2 minutes.
Yep.
That's not how life works, man.
No, not at all. Doesn't show all the F-bombs and the sweating and the yelling and the dust and all of the inconvenience. And that's the imperfection. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and just to close out this one final thought, it's like that you get up in the morning, and if you don't have to go out to work, you work remotely, you don't have to go through this. But if you're going to go out, most of us, you'll get up, you'll brush your teeth, you'll, if you have hair, you'll do something with your hair, you'll take a shower, you'll put on a particular set of clothes, depending on where you're going. And then you walk out into the world, and unless you're frowning, the whole world thinks you're fine. You could be a fucking mess.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
what
most
you
of us
look,
are a mess most of the time. We just,
what you look like
just-
on the outside virtually has nothing to do with how you're feeling on the inside. So let's stop making assumptions about that too.
yeah. All right. Till next week, Mark.
Sounds good, Jim.